Imagine the following scene. You are with the person you like, the moment is light, the connection seems real. And then comes that hug. But it's not just any hug, it's that kind of hug that speaks without words, that conveys everything you haven't said yet. And here comes the question: how to respond to this gesture in a striking, profound, and unforgettable way? If you know what to do right now, you can leave such a strong impression that this person will think of you forever. In this video, we will delve into the hidden power of gestures and emotions in light of the depth psychology of Carl Jung, one of the greatest names in the human mind. Let's talk about synchronicity, the collective unconscious, and how these ideas can help you turn something seemingly simple, like a hug, into an experience that creates real and lasting bonds. The right answer at the right time can touch something deeper in the other person, something she didn't even know she was looking for. And if you enjoy content about behavior, relationships, and psychology with a practical and transformative footprint, subscribe to the channel now. Activate the bell so you don't miss anything and leave the like, because that helps us a lot to keep bringing content that makes a difference in your life. Now, get ready, because what follows will show you why a simple gesture can have such a profound impact, and how to use it authentically, without games, to create a true and unforgettable connection. So let's go. When someone hugs you in a different way, longer, firmer, more intimate, something changes in the air. It's not just physical contact. It is as if an invisible layer between you breaks for a few seconds, revealing what is behind the gestures, the words, and even the silence. And that's exactly where the secret lies. Knowing how to respond to this hug with awareness, with presence, can completely transform the way this person sees you. According to Carl Jung, we all carry within us archetypes, universal patterns of behavior that inhabit the collective unconscious. These archetypes shape how we feel, react, and even how we connect with others. When someone hugs you intensely, they may be unconsciously activating the archetype of the caregiver, the lover, or even the soulmate. And if you respond automatically, without realizing what is happening there, you miss a precious chance to create a much deeper symbolic and emotional connection. Now, imagine that, at the moment of the hug, you choose not only to respond physically, but emotionally. You breathe in the same rhythm. He leans his head lightly. It remains 1 second longer than usual. This is not neediness, nor exaggeration. It is presence. It's the body language saying, "I'm here. I feel you. I welcome you." And this language, when used well, speaks directly to the other person's unconscious. The most curious thing is that many times, those who hug us in this way also do not understand exactly why they did it. It is something instinctive, symbolic. The right answer may even reveal something to itself, a hidden desire for connection, for security, for reciprocity. Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is a reaction, both are transformed. And the hug can be precisely this point of reaction. The spark. The instant when everything begins to change. That's why how you respond matters so much. It is not about technique or manipulation, but about sensitivity. To listen with the body. To realize that that gesture, as simple as it may seem, is loaded with meanings that go beyond logic. The person may not even rationally understand what they felt at that moment, but they will remember it. He will think of you without knowing exactly why. It will associate you with a feeling of welcome, of intensity, of something that doesn't happen to anyone. And when you become this remarkable experience in someone's life, the bond is formed almost inevitably. Not because you did something, but because you were something. It was presence, it was a symbol, it was a feeling. That is what remains. This is what leaves a trace in someone's emotional memory. Responding to such a hug is like opening a door to a silent conversation between souls. It is where the unconscious speaks louder than any words, and where true connection begins to be born. And maybe now you're wondering, how to identify this type of hug? How do you know when it's just affection and when it's something deeper? How to decipher the signs without rushing into it, but also without missing a unique opportunity? Knowing how to identify a hug that carries more than casual affection is an art that requires sensitivity and attention to detail. It is not a matter of looking for obvious signs or interpreting gestures in a forced way, but of developing a more subtle, almost intuitive perception. A deeper hug is nuanced. The time it lasts, the way the bodies fit together, the intensity of the touch, even the energy that is exchanged at that moment. All of this communicates. And most of the time, it communicates something that words haven't yet had the courage to say. You feel when it's different. There is a hesitation to let go. A comfortable silence that settles in. More synchronized breathing. A slight loosening of the muscles that indicates confidence. These are the small signs that hug is coming from a more intimate, more emotional place. It is not just a greeting or a polite gesture. It is an invitation. A silent call saying, "Stay a little longer. See me for real." The human body is an incredibly powerful communication tool. And at the moment of the hug, everything speaks. The arms that squeeze more firmly, the hands that slide smoothly down the back, the tilt of the head that fits effortlessly. These gestures activate deep emotional triggers. Carl Jung talked about the importance of symbols and nonverbal language as bridges between the conscious and the unconscious. A hug like this becomes just that, a symbol. And the symbol has strength. It touches on layers that the rational mind does not easily access. If you learn to notice these signs, you can act more consciously. It is not a matter of correspondence only by politeness or custom. It is a response loaded with intention. A gesture that returns the feeling with the same or even greater intensity. It's like returning a look that says it all, without needing a single word. And here comes something even more subtle. The time inside the embrace. A meaningful hug has rhythm. It doesn't happen in a hurry, nor with distraction. There is an internal time that is respected. The person who hugs you in this way wants to stop the world for a few seconds. And when you enter that same time, when you don't rush to leave, but you also don't force permanence, you create a dance. A perfect balance between surrender and respect. Between feeling and letting feel. Another point worth noting is the emotion that arises in you at that moment. Sometimes, a hug like this awakens something unexpected. A lump in the throat, a desire to close your eyes, a feeling of longing that doesn't even have a name. This happens because that gesture may be touching old memories, hidden desires, parts of you that were dormant. And all of this has value. All this is a clue that what is happening there is not banal. But it's not always easy to trust this feeling. The fear of misinterpreting, of creating expectations, of seeming vulnerable can make you retreat. And that's precisely where the beauty of the process lies. When you allow yourself to feel, even with uncertainty, you access a kind of truth that only exists in the now. It's not about predicting what will come next. It's about recognizing what's happening at that very moment. After all, the hug that transforms is the one you don't try to control. It's what you just live through. And when this surrender happens on both sides, something powerful begins. A type of connection that begins to take shape in silence and grows in the space between one touch and another. But what about after that? What to do when this gesture creates a link? How to transform this energy into something lasting, without falling into emotional games or insecurities? After a hug that carries all this intensity, that stirs deep emotions and leaves that silence full of meaning, an inevitable question arises. What to do with it? How to transform this moment into something that remains, that is not lost the next day as another beautiful gesture that led nowhere? The first thing that needs to be clear is that this type of connection is not sustained by forced attitudes or insecurities disguised as strategy. When someone hugs you deeply and you respond authentically, an emotional space opens up. And what will fill that space in the following days is not the anxiety about what will happen, but the coherence between what you feel and how you act. It is natural to want to maintain this bond, to feed the good feeling that was created. But that doesn't mean pressuring, charging, or trying to repeat that moment exactly as it was. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes after an intense connection is wanting to pick up the pace. The bond that forms there is delicate, subtle, and needs space to develop naturally. Carl Jung said that what is not brought to consciousness returns as destiny. If you act unconsciously, guided by the fear of loss or the lust for control, you end up sabotaging the very connection you wanted to preserve so much. So the secret lies in sensible continuity. To maintain the same level of emotional presence in each new meeting, conversation, or exchange of messages. It's not about repeating the hug. It's about keeping the energy he brought alive. This can happen with a more attentive look, with a more generous listening, with small gestures that say, "I see you," even in simple moments. The depth that began in touch can expand in coexistence if you know how to sustain this vibration without forcing it. Another crucial point is to trust the impression you made. A strong, true hug marks more than 1,000 words. If you responded with presence, if you were whole at that moment, the person felt it. Even if she can't put it into words, something has changed. And when something changes within us, the memory of what caused this transformation becomes recurrent. This means that even after the date, you remain. Not as an obsession, but as a good feeling, a memory that comes back at random moments, like a perfume that suddenly appears and brings up everything again. And that's where the importance of not trying to fill all the spaces comes in. Letting the other person feel your absence lightly is just as powerful as being present. Because this absence, when it is accompanied by a positive emotional memory, turns into nostalgia. And longing is one of the most powerful emotions to strengthen effective bonds. But be careful, this does not mean that you should purposely move away to cause an effect. It's just about respecting the other's time, not rushing, not becoming predictable. When the connection is true, it continues to pulsate even in silence. This is what differentiates a striking gesture from an empty attempt to attract attention. The key is to remain what you were at the moment of the hug. Someone present, sensitive, authentic. Because the person will not remember exactly what you said, but they will remember how they felt by your side. And that's what really remains. Building a deep emotional bond doesn't happen all at once. It starts in an instant and continues to be nurtured between the lines of the days. And this is where it all starts to take hold. How can you turn that emotional presence into a lasting imprint on the other person's unconscious? How do you let what was felt in that moment become a continuous symbol of your presence, even when you are far away? When you leave an emotional mark on someone, even if you are not around, you are starting to occupy a very special space, that of the symbol. And here comes one of Carl Jung's most fascinating concepts, the unconscious. More specifically, the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. It is at these levels of the mind that emotional memories are stored and, more importantly, associated with deep meanings. If you can awaken a striking sensation in someone, such as the one that is born from a sincere hug, that's where you come into existence, not only as a memory, but as a symbol. Symbols are images or sensations loaded with emotional meaning. When someone thinks of you and automatically feels peace, security, connection, or desire, it is not because you said or did something specific at that moment, but because you have become a symbol of those feelings. This is much more enduring than any planned dialogue or attempt to impress. The symbol remains where words fail. But how to become this symbol in someone's unconscious? It all starts with emotional coherence. The way you act needs to sustain the energy you have awakened. If your hug conveyed welcome, respect, and presence, your attitudes in the following days need to maintain that same frequency. This builds emotional confidence, something that builds slowly but takes deep roots. The person begins to associate you with a safe space within themselves. And the most incredible? This happens without her realizing it rationally. It is the unconscious doing its job. Another important point is the symbolic absence. It is not about disappearing or disappearing. It's about knowing how to leave nostalgia. Give space for the person to feel the lack of their energy, their way of being present. This reinforces the connection, because the human brain tends to value more what makes an impact and then is absent for a while. It is in this interval that the feeling expands. When you reappear, you're not starting from scratch. You're reactivating a positive emotional memory, like rekindling a flame. And this can happen with simple gestures, a short message, but loaded with meaning. A word that refers to something they lived together. A brief touch, but full of intention. You don't have to overdo it. In fact, the more natural it is, the stronger the effect will be. Remember, the unconscious responds to emotional truth, not performance. Carl Jung also talked about the concept of anima, and animus, the unconscious images of the masculine and feminine within each person. When you access this symbolic space in the other, you can end up representing much more than your real personality. You can become, without even knowing it, the idealized image of what that person is looking for in an emotional bond. And that's powerful, because it means that you get to live not only in the present of the relationship, but also in the other person's inner world. Therefore, it is essential to be aware of the impact you cause. The energy you transmit in the small gestures, in the looks, in the shared silence, all of this is absorbed and reinterpreted by the other's unconscious. And when that energy is genuine, it creates a lasting effect that resists time, distance, and even the absence of words. This is how you become unforgettable, not by insistence, but by true presence. By touching something that goes beyond the conscious mind, something that resonates within, where memories become symbols and feelings turn into deep bonds. Now, what many don't realize is that this symbolic connection also requires emotional responsibility. Because when you occupy this space in the other, you start to directly influence the way they feel about themselves and the world. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. Creating a symbolic connection with someone is, without a doubt, one of the most profound and transformative experiences we can live. But along with this intensity comes something that many ignore: emotional responsibility. When you occupy a space within someone's mind and heart, especially on unconscious levels, you become part of how that person feels, thinks, and even sees themselves. And this is no small feat. Carl Jung always reinforced that everything we touch in others also touches us back. There is no true emotional involvement without exchange. When you awaken deep feelings in someone, you also need to be willing to hold that energy with maturity. This does not mean that you need to make immediate commitments or live up to expectations that you cannot meet. It just means that if you've chosen to connect in a genuine way, you need to continue to be honest with what you feel and what you offer. And here comes a delicate issue: knowing how to recognize one's own limits. Sometimes, the connection created is so strong that it makes you want to dive in without thinking. But depth without clarity can turn into confusion. It is necessary to be aware of what is being built, the pace at which everything is evolving. Caring for others begins with caring for oneself. If you feel like you're going too fast, or that something is destabilizing you emotionally, this needs to be noted. Because the other also feels it, even if in a subtle way. One of the biggest signs of emotional maturity is the ability to keep affection alive without invading the other's space. Respect other people's time, welcome emotions without wanting to control them, be present without suffocating. This strengthens the bond far more potently than desperate attempts to secure a place in the person's life. And it is precisely this emotional security that makes you become a positive reference within it. Someone who not only scored, but who also inspired balance and confidence. Jung said that in relationships, we often don't see the other as they are, but as we are. We project our fears, our desires, our idealizations. And this is also true the other way around. The other can project onto you parts of him that are hidden. This is why emotional honesty becomes essential. You need to be aware of the role you are playing in the person's life, and whether that role truly corresponds to your essence. When there is misalignment, misunderstandings, frustrations, and, in more intense cases, emotional wounds that are difficult to heal arise. But when everything is in harmony, when the connection is felt, respected, and built on truth, what forms is something rare: a bond of mutual growth. A space in which both can be vulnerable without fear, strong without having to dominate, present without depending. This type of relationship transforms. It leaves marks that are not erased because they were built with emotional truth and not with games. And if you've come this far, you've already realized that the hug was just the beginning. He opened the door to something much bigger, a journey of presence, of discovery, of creating bonds that go beyond the ordinary. And now, after understanding all of this, the gesture, the energy, the symbol, the memory, the responsibility, there remains only one question: how to make this connection, started with a simple touch, become part of a story worth living until the end. The connection that begins in a hug goes far beyond physical touch. It is, in fact, the beginning of a silent conversation between two souls. A profound exchange that escapes logic and is anchored in something much more subtle: feeling. Throughout this itinerary, we go through the invisible layers of this gesture that is so common and, at the same time, so powerful. We understand that when a hug carries intention, presence, and truth, it becomes a symbol. And symbols do not disappear. They remain alive within the emotional memory of the one who received them. Carl Jung showed us that there are unconscious forces shaping our relationships, and that what is felt deeply can mark us forever. A hug answered with awareness awakens archetypes, activates memories, and ignites feelings that perhaps not even the other knew were there. And when you understand that, you start to act with more sensitivity, more clarity, more intention. It stops just reacting to the world, and starts creating experiences that touch and transform. We also talked about the value of not filling in all the blanks, about the strength of symbolic absence and silence that allows the other to feel nostalgia. We learned that it is in the balance between presence and freedom that a true connection flourishes, and that it is not enough just to create impact. It is necessary to sustain it with emotional maturity, with coherence between what you feel and what you do. Being remembered is not the same as being unforgettable. The unforgettable is born from the sum of small, authentic moments, from the silent consistency of those who make themselves felt even when they are not. And that's where the real beauty lies. When you become part of someone's emotional narrative without having to force, manipulate, or exaggerate. You simply are. That's the power of a hug answered in the right way. It does not end when bodies separate. It continues to echo in memories, dreams, small associations of everyday life. He becomes an anchor, a reference of something rare, intense, true. And this mark, when well cared for, can be the beginning of something lasting. A relationship that is built with presence, respect, and feeling. So the next time someone hugs you differently, be there entirely. Don't waste this moment in a hurry or distraction. Feel delivered. Notice what is being said in the silence. Because perhaps it is there, in that subtle moment, that a new story is beginning to be written. A story of which you will not be just a chapter, but a living memory. A symbol. An experience that will never be forgotten. And if this content made sense to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, we dive deep into the topics that really matter, the ones that touch the heart, awaken the conscience, and help us live more truthfully. See you in the next video.